Hi, this is the Teen Writers Masterclass, created by teens for teens to support the stories of tomorrow. The goal of this masterclass is to provide teens with the knowledge and opportunity in order to get their work to the public. We're a team of 4 students based in the Orange County School of the Arts Creative Writing Conservatory. I'm Christina.
And I'm Elena. Today, we're going to cover proper screenplay formatting. We're going to go over the 3-act structure in screenplays and all about Celtics, which is a screenwriting software. Writing for the screen can be considered its own unique art. There's a precise setup to each page, every dialogue tag, and quote-unquote beat of a screenplay.
As a general rule of thumb, each page of a screenplay equals roughly about 1 minute of screen time. As such, pacing in screenwriting is of the utmost importance. A movie generally follows a 3-act structure with the beginning, middle, and end. The structure is similar to what we previously discussed in our first unit of the fundamentals of storytelling, but a feature film, which is anything from 70 to 120 minutes, will usually have the following structure. First, there's Act 1, in which the character is introduced, a problem is introduced, and the character takes their first step to trying to combat or solve the problem. However, they run into a turning point, which launches them into Act 2. So Act 2 has this turning point or midpoint reveal in the middle of the act. This is when new information throws a wrench into everything they had planned. So while the first half of the act was trying to solve this new problem after the turning point, the midpoint reveal now throws everything completely out of whack. Now the character must make a decision that will affect the story from here on out. Then we have Act 3. This is when the character faces the consequence of their actions after the midpoint reveal. They will either overcome their obstacle by the end of Act 3 or be left at a cliffhanger that will resolve in future movies or episodes. Now we're going to talk a bit about Celtics. So one of the best resources for formatting your screenplays is actually Celtx, which is an online site that helps you format. So Celtx, shown here, allows you to format a screenplay with different buttons and tab options to save time so you don't have to write it all by hand. It also gives you the ability to take notes on your screenplay actions and work collaboratively with others while writing.
If you want to pull up Celtics on another tab, create an account, and follow along, we highly suggest you do that. Anywho, a screenplay will always start as follows. At the beginning of movies, often the screen will fade in from white or black to signal the film is rolling, regardless if there's any narration. Then you have the heading, which establishes the setting of the scene. Interior is like inside, and exterior represents exterior or outside.
Then we're going to want to introduce our characters. The way we do so is very important because it's going to be the audience's first impression of our protagonist, antagonist, or anyone important to the story. It's important to characterize them both directly and indirectly. So as a basic review, direct characterization is shown by the way others talk about them or the way they explicitly refer to themselves while speaking. For example, if a teacher is talking to a student, they might say, "You're such an irresponsible student." Whereas in indirect characterization, the character is shown to have different traits or personality traits by the actions they do, maybe how people non-verbally treat them. So if it's the same student who's maybe a bit irresponsible, maybe their binder's a bit messy, or maybe they're running late.
So a few key things are happening here. First, we are introducing the character Sophie, as well as indirectly characterizing her through her environment and room. From here, we can see that she lives an average teen life, but through the quote-unquote eerie surface level nature of her room, we can tell that she's lacking some depth as a character. Hopefully by the end of the story, this depth will grow. Secondly, we have presented a problem. The issue of a college admission decision is presented through the inclusion of her application portal and how nervous she is about it. Number 3, we have transitioned from the first scene that establishes Sophie through the interruption of her mother and the sounding of a text. Now we are going to transition into talking about dialogue and how that appears on the page. Take this interaction between Sophie and her mother. This transition is marked on the screen usually by a cut, or cut to. Every time we move scenery, we need to introduce the setting with our header format, as shown below. Furthermore, when a character is first introduced, their name will appear as capitalized, shown through Jessica in all caps.
Now let's look at some dialogue. So this is a conversation between Sophie and her mom that has been happening on a previous page. One way we can know that for sure is the way that next to Sophie's mom's name is the word, in parentheses, continued. So this continued establishes that a character was speaking previously or speaking across pages. So if Sophie's mom maybe was doing an action in the middle of her dialogue, the screenwriter would interrupt that by saying Sophie's mom flips pancakes, and then moving the dialogue after that action and putting continued next to her name. That's just a clerical thing that screenwriters will do. Furthermore, there's these things called beats. So they're different than what you might have heard previously about screenplay beats, which are basically the step-by-step plot or emotional plot of a screenplay. Beats within dialogue represents a moment or a breath in which the characters may be reflecting, pausing, thinking, and so on. These are shown in parentheses, similar to how in Sophie's mom's dialogue above, she says, she speaks her dialogue easily, finally turning to Sophie. So within parentheses, screenplay writers will usually provide some directions to the actors about how to say their lines.
So you're going to use a mix of dialogue and actions to build up your story. It's important to recognize that unlike written prose in a short story or novel, or even within a poem, the audience isn't seeing the small details written in your script. Rather, they are watching the entire story play out through a screen. It is not enough to write your script, "They lived happily ever after." You need to show us. In screenplays, the phrase "show not tell" is paramount.
The hardest part of writing a script is often the beginning. It's sometimes hard to establish your new world and setting while balancing actions and dialogue. While each script is different, generally audiences dislike if there's too much exposition in the beginning presented through dialogue, like narration. Furthermore, if you don't provide enough exposition through dialogue, the story can get confusing without concrete details. As such, it's best to think of how your script looks on screen. Things such as storyboarding, sketching, or acting out scenes for your friends is often a good way to see if your script makes sense. Now, if you're using Celtics and following along, like we previously said, you can collaborate with friends on this application. An actually really cool tool on Celtics is the note-taking or annotation tool seen here. So if you look here, there's a conversation between me and our other teacher, Gabby, and we're discussing the visual importance of our scene and our character's actions. Here we're discussing the use of a specific camera movement called a dolly and the impact it has on the audience's perception of character and her emotions.
We can see this also here when we utilize the range or depth of a shot to display emotion. While often this is up to the director's interpretation, sometimes as a screenwriter you can reinforce the character's emotions and development by establishing what shot or series of shots should be used. Here we are also noting the noise in the scene that helps emphasize the shock of the character. Important actions, noises, props, and images should be capitalized. This is to ensure that if someone was reading your script, they'd be able to quickly scan to see what props and noise design is necessary. Not only are movies a visual medium, they are an auditory one as well.
So a great way to learn more about how to write a killer screenplay is actually by reading some. So we definitely recommend looking up screenplays for your favorite movies, whether that be Jaws, Romeo, Juliet, La La Land, anything and anything, and annotating them for how the screenwriter sets up the page, how they write the dialogue, and how they categorize their cast of characters throughout the script. Another great way, just in case you're not really a fan of reading, is to watch a movie and take notes. Some notes you're going to want to take are: maybe describe the character with one adjective in the beginning of the movie and how this adjective changes throughout the act, so from act 1 to 2 to 3. How does the dialogue help further the plot? What are some pieces of dialogue that stick out, whether that because they're amazing or they just sound a little bit weird? And what about the characters make them feel like they're real people? It is easy to empathize or relate to them, and is it hard? Why do you think so? So, in the spirit of looking at great screenplays and talking about dialogue, we have a little prompt for you. So you're going to write a short screenplay about 5 to 10 pages about a pair of characters. Maybe they're friends, enemies, lovers, enemies to lovers, siblings, who knows? And these two are disagreeing about the problem, but there's a twist. We as the audience don't know what that problem is. Do not reveal it, whether it be through dialogue, through exposition and actions, until the very end of the screenplay. Focus on trying to balance verbal disagreements through dialogue and the actions the characters take to show how they're feeling, as well as characterize maybe who's in the right and who's in the wrong.
You should definitely submit your work from this prompt to our submission form for feedback and/or publication. The link to the submission form is in the description box down below. So that is all for today. We hope that you enjoyed and learned something from this presentation, and that you feel ready to create some unique screenplays of your own.
As always, we have a link to review your work if you submit it to us on the Huntington Beach Public Library's website under the Teen Writers Masterclass section, and we're excited to see what you create.
Bye!